Good morning. We're in the middle of a series called Moods. And in this series, we're talking all about some of the feelings, emotions, and moods that we experience. We're diving into what it looks like to handle our moods in a healthy way, a way that doesn't let us control us, a way that won't let them be the boss of us. Some of my favorite movies are Pixar movies. They're just so great. One of my favorites growing up, and even to this day, is Monsters, Inc. And if you remember, or if you haven't seen it, the premise of the movie is that in the monster world, monsters need energy that is fueled by the screams of children. So they have to figure out what kids' fears are and then use it against them to try to scare them and collect their screams. Now, if I were to ask you, or if the monsters were trying to figure out what your greatest fears were as a kid so that they could try to scare you, what would you say? Share that in the comments. And for me, it was like Santa. When I was really young, I remember freaking out in a mall one time when my mom put me in his lap. Or maybe clowns. Maybe even this one, maybe even still to this day, if we're being a little bit honest. We're probably scared of all kinds of things as kids, but we grow out of them for the most part, hopefully, as we get older. And I think we all probably have new things, bigger things, more serious things that we might be afraid of. And that's what we're gonna talk about today. The feeling behind the stuff that we're afraid of, and that is fear. Because the truth is, we all know what it's like to feel fear. We all know what it's like to be afraid of something. And for some of you, fear is a really big deal. The stuff you're afraid of, well, you think about it a lot. And it may be the only thing that you think about. But for some of you, others of you, fear really isn't something that you think about very often. Sure, you might be worried about things in your life from time to time, but the minute the fear creeps in, you just kind of push it aside. No matter how you manage fear, what's interesting is that our imagination seems to play a big part in experiencing fear. The stuff that we're usually the most afraid of is the stuff that we imagine might happen to us. The stuff we imagine will be said about us, or the stuff we can't control, or don't see coming, or don't know how to handle it if it does come. The stuff that we can only imagine. And when we let our fear take over our minds and motivate our thoughts, it leads our imaginations down a path of endless what-ifs. What if I never have the friends I want? What if my parents get divorced? Or if I never get any taller? What if my boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with me? What if God isn't actually real? What if I fail my class? What if I have to move? What if I get in trouble? What if my dad loses his job? What if I don't make the team? What if my acne never goes away? And what if I never feel any different than the way I'm feeling right now? You see what I mean? Fear takes us down a path of endless worry. It gets our imaginations going about the things that could be or might be, or we hope will never be. It takes over our thinking. And when we're faced with our fears, most of us usually have one of three responses. One is to fight. When we're faced with fear, some of us fight against it. We act on that. We try to control the things that we can control to keep the things that we fear from actually happening. Maybe you yell at your dad to take care of himself because you're afraid he'll get sick. Or you try to force your friend to avoid that party because you're worried about what might happen if she goes. Or you study way more than you need to because you're afraid you might fail the test. You focus on what you can control and you fight back against fear by trying to take control. And you don't give up until you feel like you've fixed it or stopped it or done what you can to keep what you fear from happening from coming true. Or we have flight. You've heard like fight or flight responses to things. Others of you, maybe you're not a fighter, but you fly. You face fear by not facing it at all. Fear motivates you to not fight back, to run in the opposite direction, to avoid asking the questions that you fear will maybe lead you to doubt your faith or whatever other outcome you're afraid of. You stay away from your friends when they hurt your feelings because you don't want to face the fear that they might reject you. You're afraid of failing, so you just don't try. For you, fear sends you running away and avoiding the things that you're worried about or afraid of altogether. But there is a third way sometimes we handle this, and that is to freeze. For some of us, it just paralyzes us. We get stuck. When you're faced with the fear that something bad will happen, or you'll be disappointed, or that things won't turn out the way that you hoped, you can't get past it. You can't do anything but hide out, pull the covers back over your head, and stay there until the fear hopefully passes. And here's the thing. Fear is natural. It's real. We all experience it no matter what age we are. And I'm not here to tell you that you should never be afraid of anything, because honestly, there's a lot of stuff that we should be afraid of. And fear can help sometimes be helpful because it helps us to avoid or be cautious around the things that could hurt us. The issue is when fear takes over, when it becomes the boss of our actions, the boss of our thoughts, the boss of our life. That's when we need to figure out a new way to face it. Now, while on earth, Jesus spent most of his time with a group of 12 people, his disciples, his closest followers at the time. Because they spent so much time with Jesus, they saw him do some pretty amazing things. Heal sick, forgive sins, do miracles. So you think that maybe they wouldn't have anything to fear, because after all, they were with God in human form, Jesus, who could literally do anything and take away anything that they should ever be afraid of, right? Well, that's not actually how it worked. And take a look at a guy named Matthew, one of Jesus' closest friends and followers. He wrote down this about the life and ministry of Jesus. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, and saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." Okay, so the disciples were traveling in this boat with Jesus when all of a sudden a huge storm rolled in. Waves were so high, they were sweeping the boat. And what was Jesus doing? He was taking a nap. And as the storm was getting bigger and scarier, the disciples did what probably any of us would have done, and they freaked out. They got scared. They go to wake him up, and they're like, hello, we're about to drown, and you're kind of just chilling there. Do you want to wake up and help us? Well, this is how Jesus responds. He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." So what did Jesus do? Exactly what only he was capable of. He calmed the storm. He took the very thing that the disciples were afraid of and he stopped it in its tracks. He eased their fears not by stopping the wind and waves, but by proving that there was something else we can choose in the face of fear. And that is faith. Look back at what Jesus said when the disciples woke him up. He said, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Now, while I can't be sure because I obviously wasn't there, I don't think that Jesus said this because he was mad at his disciples. I don't think he was trying to make them feel bad or anything like that for not having enough faith. I think he was trying to show them that faith can help overcome their fear. Did the disciples have a reason to be afraid? Of course. They were on a little boat in the middle of this huge storm. That's kind of scary. But Jesus wanted them to know that their fear didn't have to be the only thing that they felt. Because there's something or someone who is more capable and more powerful than our fear, and that is Jesus. While we may not be physically tossed around by a storm on the ocean, sometimes our fear can feel a lot like that. But when we experience fear, we have more options than just fight, flight, or freeze. We have faith, and that's what Jesus offers us. So essentially, fear does not have to be the boss of you. Fear comes when we feel out of control. But the truth is, when we're out of control, Jesus is still in control. We can trust him when we're in the middle of a storm. When we feel like there's reasons for us to be afraid, we have Jesus. Will we still have reasons to be afraid in life? Yes. I'm not saying that having faith means you'll never experience fear again, but what I am saying is that faith is what gets us through fear. It's with us in fear, and it will be with us when the fear is gone. So what does this mean? What do we do with our fears? I want to take a look at one more scripture, and this comes from Peter. He says, "Cast all your cares and your anxiety on him because he cares for you." What I love about this verse is that it was written by Peter, a disciple who was with Jesus that night in the storm. So when Peter wrote this, he wrote from experience. He knew what it was like to experience fear, and he also knew what it's like to put his faith in Jesus in the midst of it. When Peter says cast, he meant throw or hurl or heave. These are active words. It means you have to intentionally choose to throw your fears towards Jesus. And why do we do this? Well, we throw our fear on Jesus because he cares for us. We can pray. We can talk to him about our fears. We can invite him into them. We can focus on all the things that we know are true about Jesus, and we can let our faith in his ability to handle our fears help us to overcome them. So this week, that's where I want you to start. I want you to think about what fears you're facing right now, big or small. They all matter here. Write them down, say them out loud, do whatever you need to do, but put some words to what you're feeling. And then secondly, I want you to, one by one, take them to Jesus. Throw them over to Him. Ask Him to help you have faith that He's in control in the midst of these things. Pray that He'll be with you in the middle of your storm. Give your fears to Him and ask Him to walk you through them. And remember, fear does not have to be the boss of you. Maybe you need a little help talking about or even identifying what it is that you're afraid of. Maybe you need someone to encourage you to trust Jesus in the midst of your fear. The good news is that that's exactly what small groups are for. And I'm so excited that on January 31st, we get to hopefully start meeting back together again. That's our target date for reopening. I'm super excited for that. So as we wrap this up this morning, I want you to think of this last question. How do I usually respond to fear? Contrast that with what it would look like for you to respond with faith. Thank you so much for joining us this week. And parents, make sure to connect with us on Facebook as we continue to provide you with some ways that you can help protect the emotional health of your teenagers. Thank you guys for tuning in, and don't go anywhere. We'll start with our main service here in just a minute.